Jesus, I pulled a Sasha.
Hey, it's Sue.
And Megan in the restricted section.
And today we're going to do our Cramathon Wrap Up.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about all the books we read for the Cramathon Readathon.
I completed 3 challenges.
I completed 4 challenges.
So, while we're talking about that, we're going to drink this beer, which I think the beer is called Dangerously Close to Stupid Amount of Kiwi. Oh. I think that's the name of the beer.
That is a mouthful.
Abstract can art. And this is a Imperial India Pale Ale brewed with kiwi, and it's from, this is not in English, imported to the US. Okay, it's a product of Belgium. So it's brewed and canned by something I can't pronounce.
It's something Belgium.
So, this is from Belgium.
Yes.
And we're gonna pour it into our
some
frosty
mugs.
Here it is. Dangerously Stupid Amount of Kiwi. Let's see.
Cheers. Let's see how kiwi this is. That's a lot of kiwi.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's
I
good.
like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, you can tell it's an Imperial. It's pretty strong. But
It is pretty strong, but it's good.
yeah, it's tasty. I like it.
Yeah, I dig that.
And it, yeah, the kiwi tastes good. All right. So, you read more than me, so why don't you go first?
I read this 3-comic series. The series is called Vault, and it's part of John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction. So there's 3 issues in the series, and I read all 3 of them for the challenge because I always kind of feel like if I just read like one of these, that it's not like enough, you know? So figured it's only 3 issues, and it's published by Storm King Comics.
So it fulfills your read harder challenge.
It does. So to read a comic that's not published by DC, Marvel, or Image. And so this was pretty good. It was about these people on a ship who encounter this like abandoned spaceship, and they go aboard and there's fuckery afoot. And so they investigate it, and there's some kind of pathogen in the ship that turns them into like these things.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, this pathogen turns the humans into these kind of creatures. So,
Sounds cool.
yeah, it was a good series. I guess there's another series, like an 8-issue series called Vortex. That's like the same, it's John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction, but it's Vortex instead of Vault.
So is this just 3 issues long? That's all?
Yeah, this is it.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So the first one I finished was, I think it was for the challenge of reading something that's not like a standard novel. So I read a book of poetry, and it's called Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats, and it's by T.S. Eliot. And I think, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what the musical Cats is based off of.
Oh, that's
this
cool.
book of poetry, I think. But yeah, they're all about cats and their cat adventures, and I thought they were really delightful and adorable. However, but there's a big but. There's definitely a racial slur in one of the poems. He uses a word, which these were published in 1939, so maybe that wasn't considered a racial slur at the time. But he uses a word that is often used, there it is, I don't want to say it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's often used to, you know, people call Asian people this, and generally it's like Chinese people. In a different poem, he's talking about a Pekingese dog, which is a dog breed that's from China. And he calls it a heathen Chinese. So
that's fucked up.
Again, like, heathen isn't necessarily a bad thing to call someone, but it's usually said in a negative way.
Right.
So, I got the feeling T.S. Eliot, not a fan of Chinese people.
Not a fan of the Chinese.
So, that was the one thing in the whole book that just was like, oh.
Oh, T.S. Eliot. Come on.
So, like, honestly, if it wasn't for that, I probably would have given it 5 stars because I thought it was super adorable and delightful. But then there was that, and I was like, oh, why? Damn it. Why, T.S. Eliot? Damn it. So I gave it 4 stars, but just be forewarned
that there's some racial stuff in there.
Yeah.
So the second book that I read was a book that was outside of my comfort zone. Y'all know I don't read a lot of romance, so I did. I read another romance novel. I read the second book in the Beards and Bondage series. It's called Sanctuary by Rebecca Weatherspoon. Sanctuary! Yeah, and this was a little bit lighter on the bondage.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it was not bad. I mean, it was still entertaining, and there was still some pretty, kinky, intimate moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was lighter on the bondage. The female, main character used to be a sex worker, and she was a dominatrix. And so she thought that was the only way that she could enjoy having sex, but then she meets this man and learns that, at first they have sex that way because that's what she's used to, but then she learns that she also enjoys sex with him well, not necessarily as a sub, just vanilla sex, not any kind of BDSM, but just where she allows him just to.
So I had assumed when you were talking about the first book that he was the dom, but he wasn't.
Well, this is these are characters.
These are different characters.
Different characters. Okay. These are it's the best friend of the main character from the first book.
I see.
And her man. Yeah. So I liked it. I think Rebecca Weatherspoon does a really good job of including a lot of good discussion about consent in her books, because even before, in the first book, it was really heavy on that, and then in this one, she explained to him before they had sex kind of the way that she liked to do it, and kind of got his okay before they had sex, and it was very heavy on the importance of consent, and it was very not derogatory to the fact that she was a sex worker. It was that's what she did, and yeah. So I think Rebecca Weatherspoon does a really good job of empowering women and being pretty respectful in her romance novels. So as far as romance novels go, I would
recommend it.
I would recommend it. Yeah,
cool. The second book I finished was The Power by Naomi Alderman, and this was for the challenge of a predicted 5-star read. And unfortunately, this was not a 5-star read for me. It's kind of weird because it's like a book within a book. And so it's a man writing what I think is a fictional account. I think it's something that he thinks could be
the history of how they got to where they are.
Yeah. So I think he's trying to say that this is something that was possibly true. But in this book, women, teenage girls at first, develop this ability to, it's
project electricity.
Electricity through their hands. And so they can touch people and kill them, or just give them
shoot it out of their hands.
And so it's a really interesting concept. And the first half of it, to me, was really compelling. I was still not fully sure what to think about it. But it was definitely compelling. But then I just lost interest at some point and was like, I don't care anymore. Because I think, to me, first of all, the whole book within a book thing, I've realized I don't think I really like that. It comes off as kind of cheesy to me. And then, although the conversation they had at the end was kind of funny, where she was because he's writing to a woman and asking her opinion on his manuscript. And she's like, have you ever considered publishing under a woman's name? Because,
that's pretty funny.
In this society, women are in power. And so, yeah, and it's been at this point, I think hundreds if not thousands of years. Probably thousands
I think
of years.
It's thousands of years after.
And so no one believes that men ever had power, that men were ever in power.
Right.
So he's telling how he thinks it went down, basically. And I think it also bothered me that it was really just, it just flipped it, and everything men have done to women, then women flipped over and was doing to men. And I'm not saying society would be great if women were in power. Women can be just as corrupt as men.
Right.
But I don't think it would be exactly the same.
Right.
And so that kind of bothered me.
That's fair.
But I'm maybe there was a certain message she was trying to portray, but I feel if the message was imagine being, like, I feel like maybe this book was written for men to read and be
that
like,
makes sense.
listen, like, oh, wow, this is really horrible whenever it's men in that position, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so for me, I was like, yeah, of course it's horrible. Like,
I think it's just, like, interesting to think of it being flipped, and then I also think, like, I think in the book, the women were trying to retaliate, and so they were doing the same things men did to them because they were doing it in revenge. Even though, like, I don't think that all women would do that.
No, of course not. And I mean, all men don't do those things either.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah, I don't know. It was literally exactly the same. And so I was like, this is boring. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, I didn't feel like it was particularly imaginative because it's like, let me just write exactly what happens in the world already.
But, like, with women doing it.
I didn't think it was bad. I gave it 3 stars, but I just was like, not feeling it.
Yeah, that's fair. So the next book I finished was Wild Seed by Octavia Butler, and that's the first book in this bind-up. It's the first book in her Patternist series. In this series, there are 2, like, immortal beings who have, like, special abilities. And the male is trying to breed a race of more of these beings. He finds the female and decides that, you know, she's what he calls wild seed because she's someone with abilities that he didn't breed. It's just someone he found naturally. And she's really valuable to him because she's immortal, and he's never up to this point, other than himself, found anyone immortal. And so she has other abilities too, like she can heal and she can shapeshift and she can do a lot of different things, and she's really powerful. And so the first book is about their relationship, and he decides that he finds her in Africa. And it's during the time of, you know, the slave trade, so there are a lot of slavers in Africa, and he decides he's going to take her and bring her to America to, like, these little colonies that he's built of his people that he's bred. And so it's kind of a story about, you know, their relationship and their struggle, because he wants her to be submissive to him, and he, like, takes her as his wife, but then he gives her to one of his sons as his wife, and he commands all of his people to obey him, basically. And so it's kind of about her struggle to deal with that, because she's been on her own for like 300 years and been independent. And then it's about his, you know, plan to breed this race of people. But in true Octavia Butler fashion, she says a lot about a lot of things in some really unique ways. But I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. It's probably one of those things that, like, when I finish the series, I'll go back and give the whole series, like, 5 stars. But, yeah, I really enjoyed it.
So the last thing that I read was there a challenge to read a comic? I can't remember what the challenge was.
It was a non-traditional novel.
That's what I did the poetry for. I don't remember what challenge I did this for, but I read a comic, and this is the issue 2 of Charlie.
He's really insistent. I'm sorry. I tried to hold him, but he did not want me to hold him.
So this is issue 2 of Charlie, and it is written by Frances Massey and Chris Burgess, and illustrated by...
What is that? He knocked my book off the table. He won't stand up.
Scared the shit out of me. This was written by Frances Massey and Chris Burgess, and it was illustrated by Christopher Harris. And the first issue of this comic was like Charlie's backstory, and kind of the backstory of, like, where, like, what's going on in the world. And Charlie is a, oh my god, I just forgot the word. Like a robot.
Like a cyborg?
Cyborg, yeah. And he was supposed to be patrolling, like, the borderlands between where these aliens had taken over a part of North America. But this comic follows a girl named, what was her name? Carrie, I think. This girl, if you can see her. I don't know. But it's like her and her family, I think they're family, like family and friends, trying to, like, get away from these aliens that are trying to kill them. And then Charlie comes in at the end, and they meet, and I assume that the next volume will have, like, both of them together.
Adventures
but
together.
Yeah, I thought this one was pretty good. Like, the drawings are really good. The story was a lot more fast-paced and like showing you versus telling you.
Less of like story building and
or
world building.
My only issue with it was that I was kind of confused in the beginning. I think maybe Carrie is having, I'm not sure if she's having like flashbacks or like nightmares or premonitions. I'm not really sure what was going on at the beginning. Because like there's some really weird stuff that doesn't seem to like, maybe I read it the wrong way. Sometimes I like don't know how to read comics correctly because I don't read them very often. But yeah, I wasn't sure what was going on at the beginning. But the second, like the last like 2/3 of it were good. So I would give it like 3.5 or 4 stars, just because, like I said, I didn't know what the fuck was happening.
Right. Like, what is going on?
But this is independently published, so it would count for that same challenge, Read Harder challenge.
That's right. Yeah.
That yours did.
Yes.
It would also count for the Read Harder challenge of reading a comic written or illustrated by a person of color.
That's true.
Just FYI.
The last book that I finished was Mind of My Mind. Again, by Octavia Butler, which is the second book in the Patternist series.
He's just full on laying on the table.
He doesn't care. He's a terrible. He's so well. He's not well behaved. You're not well behaved. But yeah, so Wild Seed is the second book in the Patternist series, and that one, or Mind of My Mind, sorry, that one follows the child of the male immortal from the first.
Okay, so it's kind of like how Lilith's Brood was, where it's like generations
forward.
Yeah.
And so this girl is a telepath, but he has like really high hopes for her to be more powerful than any of the other telepaths, and he wants to bring them all together, but like they have a hard time living with each other because they can't stay out of each other's minds, and so it drives them crazy, and they can't live with each other. They kind of they hate each other and are repelled by each other. That's the word I was looking for. So she has this power to bring them all together in this pattern, and she can call, like, they call them latent telepaths, like ones who never go through their transition and develop their abilities, but they just have like spurts of telepathy. Thank you. Telepathy. And so she can bring them in and actually like make them go through transition so they become actives, and so she can develop this huge community of telepaths. And so it's about her discovering her abilities and like the conflict that she goes through, and she's developing this community. And yeah, it's also very good. Again, in true Octavia Butler fashion, she blew my mind.
Did you read any others?
No, that was it. Those were my 4 books that I read. And
yep, I only read those 3. I kind of like, I'm surprised I even got as much read as I did, because I worked so much overtime last week I didn't have time to read. So I think I did well considering.
Yeah, definitely. I think you did very well.
Yeah, and this beer, I really like it.
It's really good.
It could be dangerous because it's Imperial. I think it's like, what, 11.5%?
I think so.
ABV?
Oh, it's only 9.3.
Oh.
I mean, only. It's not too bad for an Imperial.
Okay, that's not as high as I thought it was then. But it tastes really good, and I could just chug the shit out of this.
Yeah, it tastes delicious.
Yeah, it's like a little tart, but in a nice way.
Yeah, because I think the sweetness kind of overcomes the tartness.
Yeah, but it definitely tastes a lot like Kiwi. You get that hoppy IPA in there too.
But it's tasty. I think the sweetness from the Kiwi like overcomes the bitterness for me.
Yeah.
Because that's the part about IPAs I don't usually like, but it's really good.
Yeah, so there it is. Dangerously close to stupid amount of Kiwi. Check it out if you can find it in your area. If you read any of these books, let us know what you thought.
Yes.
And if you participated in Cramathon.
How'd you do?
That's going to be it for us today.
There will be some links down below where you can find us elsewhere on the internet.
If you have not subscribed yet, please do, to see more of this fella that you can
here.
barely see right now.
He's always in our videos.
He's
because
just laying on the table. Why
he's
not?
a very bad boy.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.